Sure.
I'm just real excited. This is the Critical Conversation Leadership Series, and I wanted to talk to someone who would know what's going on in the fire service. So I figured, why not pick on the busiest man in the world, particularly a month out of the big show, uh, and talk to a guy who I think has his pulse on the fire service, and that's Chief Bobby Halton, the editor of Fire Engineering Magazine. And what is your title for the FDIC? Uh,
Well, just like a bank, they call me a vice president. So me and I think everybody else that works there, we I'm the vice president. The company that owns us, Clarion Fire Rescue Group, they own FDIC, Fire Engineering, Firepress Emergency Equipment, Firefighter Nation, Journal of Emergency Services, and they kind of asked me to keep my eye on all of that for them, which is a really nice. It's a nice thing to occupy your time. You know, you,
I
you,
imagine it does.
so not only do I have FDIC coming up the first week of August, I'm running a show in San Antonio called EMS Today the
That's
third week of
right.
August.
That's right. I
So
had forgotten about that.
I run out to San Antonio, and then 6 months later we do it all over again.
Yeah, right.
So
Because we're behind the ball.
the
We're actually
turnaround is going to
late.
be incredible. And in the meantime, we'll publish all those magazines, 24 magazines and all the websites and all that stuff at the same time. So,
So that's exactly why I
oh, and our
was so.
books and video division. That's right. Our
Don't
fire
forget
academy
them,
and our fire academy. I forgot about our fire academy. Wait a
and
minute.
don't forget the books. Don't forget the books.
Books and video.
So my our buddy Papa has got his ventilation book out. Very excited about that.
Yeah, that's a great book.
Did you hear about PJ?
Yes, the new director of the Connecticut Fire Training
Yes.
Academy.
His
Phenomenal.
boss is going to be his boss is working on helping a student with a master's thesis right now, but he hopes to be able to pop in here and at some point. Just been very kind to us. He makes sure that the information about this program, other programs, gets out.
And
So
I'm
he's here.
surprised not to see Peter. I thought for sure we'd have Peter down there somewhere.
It, they may pop in again. This is a little bit unusual time for us, but again, we wanted to. We can appreciate your being able to give us this time. So let's. What I wanted to is quiz your brain and quiz your mind, because again, as you're involved in so many things, you're looking at so many articles, you're watching so many trends break over, as they're coming through. Why don't we talk about two or three things that you think are big issues in the fire service, and I'm kind of looking for future trends, but again, things that are going on right now that you think are going to really rise to a point where we're going to need to get our try to get our hands wrapped around them.
Well, I think two of them are physical, and the third one is really more cognitive. So you've got two real didactic elements that are happening right now that are associated with the fire service in so many really kind of interesting, complex ways. The first being depending on where you live, they're being called pedestal buildings. They're being called, they're a bodega +3, or they're, shopping mall parking garage +5 or 7 or 8 or 10. We had a fire yesterday. I saw briefly the fire yesterday, but it was another one under construction, burnt to the ground. They're a new phenomena, and they're not, right? In other words, in today's world, anything that's 15 seconds old is yesterday, but they're actually been with us for probably arguably the last 10 years or so. The proliferation of them now, though, is vast, and I think it's going to continue for two reasons. It allows people that normally would have moved further into an urban area as they age, people like me, because of the availability of medical care, having people around you, shopping, things of that nature, to where when you live in a rural area, like I do currently, but access to those things requires transportation and time,
Right.
and you use those things more frequently. So in the past, we either created these communities like Del Webb or the villages or something like that, that
Right.
had these independent homes, which was fine and lovely, and lots of people use them and they work well. I'm not disparaging them. They may be in fact safer, but they're expensive and they're not quite for everybody. The other side of it is gentrification. And when you're looking at gentrification, it's much easier to build one of these new prefab 60 home or 60 apartment, 80 apartment, 200 apartment places than it is to refurb an old brick and mortar building, retrofit all of the innovation that people want, whether it's, you're taking buildings that were built with, maybe two stairwells, and now you're trying to, compartmentalize it into multiple apartments and such. So it's a little more difficult, although much more aesthetically pleasing. It's more difficult. So around the country, you're seeing these, and some of them are modest. They're 16, 18, 24, condos, but some of them are massive. Some of them are just absolutely massive. Mike Dugan and I just haphazardly ran into one outside of King of Prussia, and it was a complex of them.
Right.
So it wasn't one, it was 10 or 12 all being built simultaneously. And so the parking garage, non-combustible, concrete, first floor, then the bodegas, the Starbucks, the dry cleaners, the whatever they're going to put in there, for convenience sake, down on that floor. And then 7 or 8 stories of wood frame, basically condo / apartments. Those fires are, I don't want to say insurmountable, but they're incredibly challenging. In other words, the resource commitment that you have to make to a fire of that magnitude under construction, it's basically, it's a water show. You just let it go. But once they're done, and we've had fires in some that have been completed, very difficult fires. Access and egress is difficult. Staging is difficult. The manpower constraints are massive. The water management issues are massive. So wrapping our head around that new element of construction is going to be interesting, right? And alongside of that, there's still a push within the building industry, because they call it green or sustainable, and it's anything but, to build wood high rises. The problem with that is that we've got a little bit of history with wood buildings here in America, and none of it ended well. Even the great John J. Bresnan was killed in a wooden, high-rise fire back quote unquote back in the day, early 1900s, along with the Medal of Gordon Bennett Medal winner. His name escapes me at the moment, but the water cistern that held the water supply for the building on the top, that came crashing through the roof as the fire. It was a lamp factory of all things too. So it came crashing through the roof and killed them both at that particular fire.
Now,
So,
are we skirting the resident? Are we skirting the sprinklers in those, or we just don't have or the fire load is just not matched up correctly?
well, I'll tell you, and I'm sure John can chime in on this one, because when you're talking about R3, and so it's the scourge of the codes. So when you're doing residential sprinklers, basically it's mostly the common areas. Now sometimes you'll have people who'll do a more thorough job and they'll do the entire apartment complex, but generally speaking, you're talking about the hallways, you're talking about shared areas, right? So the fires, think about, well, not the same kind of building, but if you think about the American Hotel in Dubai, when they had a fire on New Year's Eve, and it was a skin fire, right? Just rolled balcony to balcony to balcony to balcony to balcony. So as we build these new residential places, what are they building off of all of the upper priced condos have what? A balcony, right? And they're all contiguous. So you can just imagine, John Q. Public taking his hibachi out there, or what are they, deep frying their chicken, or turkey rather, the deep fried chicken thing, and then it's Katie bar the door, because it's gonna, it's gonna run. Now, what was interesting in Grenfell, the Grenfell fire, another skin fire as it went up, but in Grenfell, the windows assemblies had enough draft that fire got drawn into the building. The American Hotel in Dubai, that building was built stout enough that that was basically just a skin fire. But when you have enough draft, and remember when you're building with wood, wood is wood. Back in my days when I pounded nails as a kid, we would, you talk to the contractor and he would always meet with the families later and they said, well, the windows aren't, so, well, wood is wood. Over time, it warps, it dries, things happen to it. So you're always going to have more gaps and the building's going to be more susceptible to draft as a wood building than a steel concrete building ever would. So that's a big physical issue that we're dealing with. And I think that one's going to be interesting to see how the communities that are going with that type of construction and promoting that kind of construction, how they're going to manage that with existing resources, right? If you look at the proliferation of McDonald's across America, or now Starbucks, very few of them ever go out of business because those people wait till the population's there, they've got the income stream, they build one of those enterprises. Unfortunately, the American Fire Service is not Starbucks, we're not McDonald's. So as our communities build out, you don't see the new fire stations coming in. You don't see the new, staffing. And I'm full disclosure, I'm a volunteer firefighter out here. I do training with a couple of different organizations out here. And I'm very grateful and blessed to be able to participate and have fun with these guys and gals. And it's just the greatest joy of my life because I get to hang around with young people and they teach me how to turn on my phone and stuff and stop my VCR from blinking 12, 12, 12. So just kidding. It's a good joke though, huh? VCR. I even got John to smile on that one. John, if your VCR is blinking, I got you, brother. So we get to do that. But even here in the community I'm in, and it's Owasso, Collinsville, Oklahoma area, I'm seeing these buildings going up in Owasso. Great organization, great fire department, fully paid little fire department for this community here. We're right on the border of Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we're on the northern border of Tulsa, Oklahoma. So, but for the resources of Owasso, should one of those things start to go, that's it. Y'all come, and call the neighbors because we're all going to be on TV. It's going to be a long night. And those are campaign fires.
I think one of the other things that goes along with that is many times in the building codes and the fire codes, we'll give some exiting distancing and we'll give some protection away. And we'll, if we have some sprinklers there, right? Even an alarm system there, we'll give some distances away. And then of course that allows you to put more stuff in. You don't have to have as many hallways, as many stairwells or whatever it may be. And again, as we've talked about before, is having the ability to plan ahead for your worst case scenario and then build your system to that rather than waiting and then calling for help. You know what I mean? That's,
well, I think it gets even more nuanced than that. Now, generally speaking, we would think, well, we can do a garden apartment stretch. You know what I mean? We can do a vertical standpipe. Well, good luck doing that when you've got one of these configurations with multiples, right? So you've got 240 potential condos in 4 different buildings, and you're talking about that are kind of connected, but the void space between them, the barriers aren't such that you're going to stop radiant heat from catching the next one, and then give us a good wind. And then the secondary issue to that, not just water supply, long stretches, laddering issues, setback issues, then you've got air, right? Life is better with air. Did an in-depth study on it. People do a whole lot better when they have air. Trust me. I'm not sure, pretty much foolproof. We need it. As firefighters, we also need it. And so the incredible fight we get with FARS, firefighter air replenishment systems, even in high rises, we haven't even begun to broach putting FARs into supermarkets and assembly buildings and malls, and now these gigantic multifamily residential complexes and they're not like a multifamily residential high rise. They're different, right? The multifamily residential high rises that we're all really familiar with, they're either brick and mortar or brick and steel. They have standpipes in them. They have got pressurized stairwells. They've got bulkheads. They've got things that we can manage. these things that they're building, these toothpick palaces they're building today don't have any of that.
Let's talk a little bit just for the audience to make sure everybody's on the same page. So as far as the essentially is we pre-pipe, excuse me, breathing air through the system at designated points, similar to the same concept as a standpipe. And then as you would have this event, right? You would have literally an air branch, not
Yes.
like helicopters, but like breathing air, and you would have designated locations where you could go and connect using the
Yes,
rapid
there's
fill.
an NFPA standard for it. You're exactly right, and you can have air supplied in it in reserve. So in other words, there's a certain amount of air there, and you can pump to it. You could bring an air system and pump air into the system just like we pump into a standpipe. So there's it has two phases to it, if you will, right? Almost like when you roll up on a job, you can go on tank for a while, and then tank to fill, and then you got your tank going. So it's the same kind of thing with firefighter air replenishment systems, or FARs. And so folks like me are advocating that system should be advanced to any building where firefighters can be expected to travel more than 200 feet from the entrance. And that's a lot of buildings, in my opinion. And that's just my anecdotal distance. Someone should probably do a study to figure out what we really need to have. But when a guy or a gal gets in trouble on the fire ground, I've read enough line of duty rescues and enough line of duty death reports to know that moving a firefighter who's not on air beyond 200 feet is a phenomenal enterprise. And so my concern is that if the firefighters run out of air, then everything else is just interesting. You can have a standpipe building. We need to start thinking of firefighting like we think of building assemblies, right? In other words, you guys do in-depth research on people's hygiene issues for buildings and industrial sites. Could you imagine somebody designing a complex where they look at each component of it individually and not as a total assembly? Now, we don't do that with buildings, but we do it as we approach the firefighting. And I've even heard firefighters talk about firefighting being done in a linear fashion. In other words, we'll do this, and then we'll do that, and then we'll do this. And that completely denies the reality of the fireground. The fireground's a dynamically complex environment, right? And from studying things like complexity, we understand how one tiny element that's just a small degree of difference in air pressure, wind direction, fuel loading can make a catastrophic difference in the outcome from one event to the next. And so when you're dealing with, and I think I want to say it was either Glick, it was James, I think it was Glick. He was talking about self-actualizing, not self-regulating systems. In other words, dynamically complex systems, and how they basically self-regulate. But he said strange things happen on the boundaries, right? In other words, and that's where we operate. We operate on the boundaries. And when you look at some of these events where firefighters have been killed or injured, the nuance of it, the tiny little component of it that was just a broken window or a basement fire that articulated with a cock loft that caused a catastrophic, explosion of fire.
Somebody left the door open in an apartment, or someone didn't close the door behind them, or open the basement window.
The ceiling drops, and the list goes on and on. So for me, I think that's one of the three big things we're going to be looking at. What happened yesterday? We're seeing one a week, and I don't want us to start noticing it the day we're going to a multiple line of duty death fatality, or the day that we're burying 10 or 20 civilians. I don't want that to be the day that we say, gosh, I guess we should have been talking about this.
And one of the things I think we're okay at, but we need to get better at, I'm going to take a little bit of a left-hand turn here. Did you see, I know you probably saw the release Billy did about the arrests up in New York.
Yeah.
About for the inspectors for falsifying records, or we'll figure out how that all comes out. So it's not just this goes back to our five E's, right? This is part of that community risk picture reduction, where we look at that code enforcement. Yeah, we'll plan for the response. We'll bring extra people, But again, I say this all the time. I've never had to activate a RIT team for a fire that didn't happen, right? Or for a fire where we had good code enforcement and good protection, so that it stayed small enough that, again, it could be a can job rather than having to stretch the big line to, again, for the waterworks show that everybody thinks is impressive, but again, did it need to happen? You know.
Yeah, and and even if you have a robust fire prevention bureau, things happen.
Right.
We're human, and a gal sweating pipe, doesn't notice that a piece of solder, hit the insulation, or a well-meaning, a barrel fire, just because the troops are, the construction guys are cold, and an ember gets out. Things are always going to happen, and albeit with the best of intentions, and sometimes with no ill intent, because we're human, we're frail, and we're never going to live in a perfect world. It always seems to amaze me that the modern day folks want every risk in life to be mitigated to zero. In other words, they think that, and we're doing a pretty good job. Oh, there's Peter, he made it. We were looking for you earlier, Pete. You're late, but we'll forgive you. But it's kind of fascinating to me that the modern construct is that nothing bad should ever happen to anybody, and it's almost like the Homo Deus book, if you've read that brilliant book by a young Israeli. I disagree with much of it, but a lot of it's wonderful. But what the point of it is that people are starting to think of themselves as little gods, and they gotta freeze my brain and I'll live forever. Well, good luck with that. They're going to freeze anybody's brain. Start with Peter's. I've talked to the guy. It needs freezing. So I'm teasing you, Pete. Welcome aboard. So, but
How you doing, Chief?
hey, buddy, I'm good. Good. Always great to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, my friend.
So we're just talking about some of the big challenges. We're talking about the toothpick palaces and the new, modern day renovate, kind of this movement towards building these modern day taxpayers is what I think they are. Because although you don't have the merchants living above like we did back in the day, you still have mercantile first, non-combustible mercantile first floor or parking garage, and then up you go with condos all made of wood, which I think are
taxpayer on steroids.
Yeah, taxpayers on steroids. Yeah, yeah.
You see those air replenishing systems taking off? Do you know of any communities that are really, even big cities?
Yeah, Phoenix, Arizona has them. A couple of other places have them. There's there are a few places I've been in. They're great to see on the outside of a building. I think that it's just, and what's funny too is that some of the folks say, well, how often are the firefighters ever going to need to use it? And I'm like, well, how often are they using the standpipes in most cities? But we still have standpipes in all those buildings, and water's great. But I can go a long time without water. I can't go long at all without air. I've never run across a firefighter who's alarm bells going off, screaming, "Quick, give me a drink of water!" That they're trying to breathe. So it's kind of a straw man argument, right? Well, they're not being used. Yeah, but the day they are used is the day that some firefighter doesn't breathe smoke.
With their valuable.
And the problem with breathing smoke is twofold. Oftentimes it kills you right there, drops you like third period French, and that's a terrible day. But the other side of it is when it kills you slowly,
Yep.
Like your third wife. I mean, it just bites away, nibbles. It's like getting nibbled to death by goldfish. That's what dying from cancer is like. It's slow, it's tedious, and it becomes excruciatingly painful. So, and no disrespect to anybody's third wife or third husband. I didn't mean to disparage anybody that's done that. Peter, and you in particular. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I do have a buddy. I went to a wedding the other day. I swear to God, with a buddy who brought his fourth wife, and I was like, yeah, maybe it's you.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna throw it out there. Maybe it's you. So, and he's a former cop, so that tells you everything you need to know.
We're not going to go there.
Right, exactly. Why would anybody marry a cop?
Political.
Yeah. So I think that's the number one thing I think physically that we're looking at. The second thing that I think we're going to be looking at physically, it has to do with natural gas and how we're moving, I think, to natural gas in a much broader way. And one of the guys leading the charge on this is a guy named Jerry Knapp. And if you don't know Jerry Knapp, Google Jerry Knapp, go to fireengineering.com. Jerry's written a couple of really great pieces on us on metal oxide detectors. And so, when you've gone to a residential gas leak or smell of gas in the area, and you know how you can smell the gas and you take out your 4 gas meter and you're getting nothing. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, we must be okay because I'm not getting anything. Well, that's because that you need one of these metal oxide detectors. You take out your metal oxide detector and it's going to tell you you're in trouble. It's going to tell you, no, that you're within the explosive range. So that's why the folks from the gas company, they never get blown up. But we as firefighters routinely get jammed up. So I think you're going to see a lot more natural gas as we move through renewable fuels and all of this, because it's the one renewable fuel that we have that's incredibly clean to use. It's incredibly clean. It's not at all like coal or oil. Natural gas, and the United States has more of it than just about any place in the world. And so you're going to see a big growth in this, right? You're going to see a lot of communities moving over to it, encouraging people to move over to it. The problem with electricity is you've got to generate it somehow. And so you're going to see gas-fired electrical plants, but you're also going to see a lot of communities just move towards gas. And as we move towards these smaller nuclear plants, in other words, you're going to see what they're working on now in the energy world, which is a fascinating world and firefighters should be paying attention to this stuff. They're talking about very small nuclear plants. I mean, very small ones that can power communities of 200,000 or 300,000, not 3 Mile Islands, and we're not talking about nuclear power plants that do the Northeast coast. We're talking about nuclear power plants that are very small. And the reason that seems to make sense to the people in that industry is because then, should there ever be a failure, you have a much more restricted area that you have to worry about, right?
Right.
And nuclear issues, I grew up in the age of the giant ants and the 50-foot man and the 50-foot woman. Remember all those goofy movies, Peter, that we watched because Spider-Man got nuclear radiation. He turns into that's
In my time, Chief.
right. Well, the problem is we're raising a generation of people who have a hard time separating fact from fiction and understanding that there is an objective reality. We're almost convincing everyone that everything is subjective. Well, no, there are objective truths. It's like people think, just get past that. Firefighters live in the world of objective realities. If you're enamored with postmodernism and obscure language and fantasy, good luck. That's great for academia. Doesn't play out well on the fire ground. On the fire ground, it's gravity, physics, nature, energy, do your job. So I think that we're going to see a really growing awareness of 3D firefighting, which is how you battle gas emergencies. I think that's going to grow. If you look at some of the energy sector work that we've been doing lately, whether it's the gas and chemical plant fires and things like that we've been having around the country, I think those issues are going to be becoming more pronounced in a lot of communities because these storage facilities and such are much more widespread across the continental United States than you'd think. And as we move towards smarter energy, those facilities are going to become more and more important to protect and understand. And obviously you guys are in that directly in that field. So
that's where I was going to go, is if you look at, we do spend a lot of time in power plants because anytime they need to go into a hole where they got to fix something, we're there to back them up. And then a bunch of other things that we do. So, but again, they seem to be a tight industry and obviously a lot of regulation. Now, having said that, and again, kind of going along with what you're saying about depending on where that gas line's going through, that pressurized line's going through, where it's being generated, how it's being used, and the local regulatory, there's some federal stuff, obviously, that everybody has to do. But, as we look at it up here in the Northeast, we're regulated pretty heavily. So when it comes to safety stuff, there's a lot of contingencies that we actually help out with, and prevention, I should say, that we help out with. As we start spreading out, though, again, if I'm going to go build a large storage facility, I'm not going to go someplace where there's a lot of rules and a lot of extra expense. I'm going to go someplace where there's maybe not so much, and they're happy to have any development whatsoever in that space. So again, that goes back to, you may have, you may be ready for whatever your normal responses are for your bread and butter, whatever
So,
delivery it
so you
is.
raised kind of an interesting point, and I'm just going to dovetail off of that. It would be useful to read Holnagel, Decker, Ensley, Woods, the people who are now working with what's called safety differently or safety third. Now that line of safety inquiry, it's also just about 10 years old, because we went from the age of technology, right? Trains and such and heavy regulation. And then we went to the age of human factors where everything was human caused. And we still have some agencies and associations that are still lost and mired in that delusion. And now we've kind of moved into the age of safety management, if you will,
Right.
is what they call it. And it's safety differently. And one of the things that they're finding is that more rules, more regulations may not be the answer, right? Redundant safety systems. Look at the Boeing 737 with this new, technology they put into that, albeit with the best of intentions, but how it interfaced with the other safety systems turned out to be catastrophic. Really at 3 Mile Island, that was what happened there. You had two safety systems that didn't talk well to each other, and that's what caused the problem there. So there's a lot of research being done on rules, and I'm not saying we should live in anarchy or not have rules, but what I am saying is that there almost becomes a point where they actually get in their own way, right? And there are also a point to where as we started the conversation, where people think that if we have enough rules, all risk is going to be mitigated to zero, and that is not going to happen. So, so I think that that's a very, very interesting way to look at it. In other words, where people choose to build right now, you're up in the Northeast. I live in America, in the lower, in what I call the flyover states. We call it America, and not so much. So, but it's interesting, right? It's a different approach to life, and it's a different approach to management. And I always, it's interesting. I had this conversation with some guys and troops the other day. It just happened to all be guys, and they were saying, well, if you were in trouble and you were low on air, should you conserve your air and wait for somebody to come rescue you, or should you, fight like hell and try to self-rescue? And I was the only guy saying, oh no, I'm going to fight like hell, and I'm going to do everything I can to get out of there. If I use up my air, I use up my air, but I'm not going to sit there and wait for somebody to rescue me. It's just like, I don't agree with the guys who are saying to attack and gals who are saying to attack a fire on tank water. I don't agree with that. If you have a plug, lay in, drop, loop load it. We used to call it looping a plug. You just put a piece of webbing on the end of your 5 or your 4, whatever, and a hydrant bag, and you just loop it and drive in, and let heck, it's so simple. Even a medic can hook up to the hydrant, for God's sakes. I mean, any mouth breather can do that. So you could probably train the cops to do it if you
Well, I
had.
was going to say, if you're
Maybe a bridge too far. Maybe a bridge too far.
no, if
Sorry.
you're small enough, they know how to do that.
You'd end up with a hydrant shot full of holes. I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? So, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't have that conversation, right? I had 2 of my friends on a webcast because they wrote an article for me about just that. They think we should, in order to save lives, it takes 30 seconds to catch a plug. Somebody could die in that 30 seconds. And I get it. But I think the incidents of that happening just don't make me feel comfortable, because I've seen a lot more fires where people have outrun their coverage trying to fight the fire on tank water. So I'm a catch a plug kind of guy. So it's the same kind of thing, right? It's safety third. In other words, if I'm going to rely on, if I'm engine 1 and I decide to go on tank water and I'm trusting engine 2 to lay in for me, give me my water, they could run over a squirrel and have to stop and do CPR, pet CPR. Something horrible could happen. And now I'm inside without water. And that's a big day. You know, when that happens to you, that's a big day. And not every fire is going to just a, you know, size 13 door opener. You're inside, you know, 20 seconds later as a pull. You know, the fire you go to that's not the fire that's going to be a one-line fire is not the one you want to run out of water in. And so, but I think those discussions are worth having, right? I mean, I'm the last guy in the world to say, let's not have the discussions. Matter of fact, I'm the guy that published their article because I want to have that discussion, you know, and I don't believe in the false canard that people are, you know, being ordered to lay in, that they don't have an option. If you ride up and you see Throckmorton hanging out of the window, you go in on tank water. You know, don't take me wrong. I'm not saying if you really think you've got a rescue, go for the rescue. You know, but in my world, you probably wouldn't be stretching if you knew either. You'd be going for a rescue, and the stretch would be to cover you as you came out, right? Or something like that. So I don't know. That's another piece of the argument. But I think that's something else that the fire service kind of segues into my third thing that I was going to bring up, is that we're learning.
Can I add one thing to that, Chief?
Sure.
So I think, but that's also why when we do a confined space standby, right? Because we have somebody that's in doing whatever they're going to do. Before they go in, we also make sure they're tuned up on how to self-rescue themselves and how, right? What's the first thing you need to do? Notification, blah, blah, blah. We're going to be right here, what to expect from us. So that again, because I could fall down and smack my head and now I got one less set of hands, right? So again, it's part of that process is in that as you're doing the job brief, and again, we don't get to do job briefs. Our job briefs are firehouse table reviews. But you know, when we go into there, the advantage we have is we have this conversation before anything happens as to what you're going to do. You can't do that on the fire ground necessarily. But if you have if you have the same set of procedures, but you have to let the guys deviate. That's what the officers are there for, right? If they know what they're supposed to do, but if they have to do something a little different to solve the problem.
So you know what a postmortem is, right? After the patient dies,
yeah.
The doctors try to figure out what killed him. The Dr. Klein picked it up, I think, from the Navy. The Navy do what are called premortems. So before you do something, you figure out all the ways doing this could kill you, and then you try to avoid that, right? So if you do a premortem, it works out a whole lot better for the patient than the postmortem. Exactly. So if you're potentially the patient, you want the premortem and not the postmortem. Right? Another big piece of research I did.
We call those pre-plans. What could go wrong here, right? What could possibly happen that would screw us up and screw them up?
So the third part kind of goes right in there with the safety third idea, right? But it kind of goes. It almost sounds like it's an oppositional idea, right? We've grown up in the age of Fireground Command, and I helped Alan write the second edition. I'm very proud I haven't done that. But one part of it is completely wrong, and that would be the purpose of the book. In other words, the purpose of the book was that the first due arriving officer should assume command and yada, yada, yada. Okay, no. The first arriving officer should size it up, report what he has. Command should be whoever command is. And command could be people back in a dispatch center today. As elegant as most our technology is, mini cams, helmet cams, cams on rigs, you know, now we've got people who, you know, we've got information centers where people can take cell phones. There's a program called Good Sam that they're using down in San Antonio, Texas, where they can actually hook right into somebody's cell phone and see the patient and treat the patient before the medics even get there, get things going. And they do the same thing with fires. So what I'm saying is, with everything we're learning about how people's cognitive bandwidth goes, we know that from all the research that most individuals are good for about 4 decisions. When there's limited time, high stakes, limited information, pressure, and limited resources, you can make about 4 decent decisions, and then you're just making shit up after that. You'll give old mnemonics. You'll say anything to fill the dead air, but you're really not making great decisions, good decisions. And we know that for fact. What we also know is if you add one other voice, bring in one other peer to help you make those decisions, that the quality of the decisions and the amount of decisions that you can make go up exponentially. It's the old more fingers on the knife, right? And so, but we don't do that on the Fireground. When we wrote Fireground Command, the whole thing was the first do. Well, think about the one poor person. You're standing there, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You got people yelling at you. You got fire coming out 2 or 3 windows. You've got rigs pulling in, and you're supposed to be able to stand back and say, engine one, assuming command at walk and don't walk. I've got a blue late model 50s home with a beautiful fountain in the front. The feng shui was designed by Miller and Sons, and you can see the facade painted a beautiful mauve. However, at this point, the fire seems to be extending to you. Engine one to engine two. I'd like you to lay engine one to truck three. When you arrive in 3 minutes, the fire will probably have progressed. You don't know where the fire is going to be in 3 minutes, and you can't think that far ahead. The first due officer is worried about where the fire is, if people are endangered, where's water's coming from, where to spot that rig, and what to do with his crew. So he's already way past 4, and to expect him to then be able to project into the future. If you were Stephen freaking Hawkins, you couldn't do that. And the dude's dead anyway. But put your modern day genius in there.
I was going with McQueen.
For me, it would be probably Nassim Taleb. For Pete, it would be Joe Biden. So it ain't going to work. I had to go there, Pete. I had to throw you under the bus.
Couldn't happen. Again, that's why I like the team, and we talked about this. I like the team concept, right? That's what we did. The first guy is going to inherit it. The next guy, and if you have the same players coming all the time, a lot of times they're very comfortable with whatever they may have to do, because you can't look at everything. You just can't. You just can't.
If you want to talk about leadership, that's the big Gordian knot to untie, right? In other words, if we're going to go around saying that and I've been saying it for about the last 10 years, if the first dude doesn't assume command, how does your system then manage that? But if you think about it, some of the more refined systems, FDNY, Boston, Chicago, those folks don't assume command. Now they always say, well, they got a guy in a buggy, 30 seconds away. And that used to be the other part of the riddle was, well, you can't assume command till you're there. Really? Why? Why can't you assume command till you're there? Now, if you're a good commander, you're not saying take an 1 3/4 line with an 1 1/8 tip, advance 300 feet of line. That's not what you do. You just say engine one, stretch a line. Engine 36, pull a backup line. You're not given. So that argument falls apart pretty quickly too. But the argument about having, so I think in the future, we're going to see information processing, command assistance centers build up inside of our dispatch to where when engine 36 rolls up, I've got a working fire in a 4-story residential. Like I said, engine 36 stand by. We've pulled up the plans for that. Engine 36 stand by. Command level Barome is here, and he's going to assist you with the placement. We're in touch with engine 42. They're 22 seconds behind you. We've got truck 11 and truck 26. Truck 11, truck 26, there's an alleyway on the corner of walk and don't walk. So you're going to see that integration happening with the technology. Here's what we can't do though, without, and the best example I can give is the old Apollo 13 movie. All of that's well and good when it's working. Technology is great until it's working. And then when it's not, it's not.
Right.
And then you better know how to do oriented search. You better know how to use a piece of paper and a pencil. You better know how to talk on the radio. You better know how to, do hand signals, and I'm serious, nowadays our face pieces are Bluetooth and with this and that, which is great. And I'm glad it's doing it, but we ought to drill regularly with it all just going to hell in a handbasket. Remember the Apollo 13 movie, the guy takes all the computers and throws them off the table. That's goes over to the chalkboard, draws the Earth, draws the moon, says our guys are here, we want them here, and they go to work.
If you remember back in the day, FDNY would go to Bell's like on Saturdays or something. Or once a month or every other week, they would go to Bell's just to keep because back then the Firestar or whatever it was was having all kinds of problems. But if everything went to crap, the Bells could work,
Right.
And
exactly. Dispatch centers today, I hope, still routinely drill with, okay, priority dispatch is down, the computers are down. Here's a street map. Here's a pad of legal pad. Here's a legal pad. Do your job.
I probably watch too much YouTube. And one of the things that I see a lot is you'll have.
But you're lucky, Nick, because the titles don't appear on the bill when you leave the hotel. Good joke.
Wrong
Write
one.
it down. That's a keeper.
Not on this computer. So, but you'll see companies like you say, we're on scene, blah, 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 we're stretching, and they go, right? So the boss gets there, he's counting heads. I've seen other ones where the boss is still en route, and the boss starts telling the company officer what to pull and what to get there, or he's sitting there and he's, instead of just saying get a line to the second floor or I mean, actually, I think the officer could probably figure out what floor, but maybe there's something the chief knows or the boss knows, but they're like, take 1 3/4 inches up the bottom, and it's like, why are you paying this guy, whatever $1,000 a year to run that rig if you don't have confidence that he's going to?
That's how we're teaching people in these training sessions. We're teaching them to do this rote deal where they do this mnemonic. You know what I mean? And and the problem with it is it's the illusion of thought. It's the illusion of command and control, and it's the absence of real processing, right? So
we just lost an icon, Mike Grant, and Mike Grant did a video with PJ down on initial hose stretching, and again the importance of just getting the first line in. Back to what you said before, I find that if you put the fire out, things get a lot better, and maybe you are supposed to be doing something else, but and Mike said he doesn't care if it's a garden hose. But again, the intent is if you get that first line in place, a lot of things should get better, and then you could have someone else, and then that second team can go do what they were going to do, or stay with you, and you throw someone else into the game to get that other one. You have to give the company officers some responsibility.
But I think it's time. So Alan Brunacini once wrote in 1967, before a promotional exam, that if something's been done a certain way for 20 years, that alone is probably enough indication that it should be done differently. Well, Alan Brunacini wrote Fireground Command in the second edition in 1984. Yeah. And so that's a lot more than 20 years. So now we're talking close to 40 years that we've been doing this, the first due will assume command. Now, I'm not saying that the first due shouldn't give a good size up. I'm not saying that the first due shouldn't, have an air of command and control about them, and a presence. But what I am saying is that if it's a complex, multi-unit, multi-dimensional fire, we're far better served to have some kind of support team, some kind of collaborative command process that's managed, by people who are not constrained to a script or a mnemonic or anything like that. In other words, they're just experienced people from that community that have access to information and communication that can help to support the person making decisions.
We had a guy, so I had a senior advisor, the Connecticut folks remember named Ronnie Samuel, the fire chief in New London. I got a third alarm going. I'm burning down old school building, and I looked over at him and I said, well, you've done this more times than me. What am I forgetting? And he said, no, you didn't forget anything. And he didn't take it as an insult at all, because I was literally asking him to pluck his mind from his experience, because they had a lot more brick buildings over where he worked and lived than I did where I worked and lived.
And experience can work against us too. In other words, one of the problems with experience is it creates patterns, right? And people think based on pattern recognition. It's how the brain works, right? And we learn certain patterns from youth, and they just continue to evolve and evolve and evolve and evolve. And it's, people call it reading body language. And the more aware you are of your surroundings, the more astute you are, the more erudite you are. So when you meet someone who's really elegant and really poised, it's generally because they're very focused, but they're also very broadly aware, right? And whether it's IQ, EQ, whatever you want to call it, social intelligence, it's the same thing with firefighting, right? You develop a certain amount of erudite intelligence, awareness, that you bring to every fire. But what happens to many of us is that we go to a lot of, single story or 2-story residential fires, fire to fire. It's an 1.75 pre-connect. You pull it first, boom, you go in. And then all of a sudden you're outside of a Walmart, or you're outside of a, a mid-rise or whatever. So what you did the last 300 fires isn't going to work here. And that's a big day. And I'm not disparaging anybody. The most important fire we go to is the single family residential fire, period. Because that's where we save most of the lives that we save. So I'm not, but what I am saying is that if we practiced better communication, better command. So if you think of Stanley McChrystal's team of teams, the reason the team of teams concept worked against an asymmetric, what was called asymmetric warfare, right? Non-conventional warfare, is because it allowed the people closest to the problem to make supported decisions, not independent decisions, but supported decisions, not get permission to do something, but to inform others of what they were doing so that everyone understood what the consequence to what they were doing or what they may not know based upon what they do know. Because the big disconnect when we do our AARs is we know the ending. And the problem with the human mind is we then think that everything that led up to it was causal, or this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And that's not true. A lot of things were happening simultaneously. And people always say, well, it's like the links in a chain. If you take the one link out, then the accident wouldn't happen. That's bullshit. We don't have chains anymore. We're not, there's very few chain-driven automobiles out there anymore. Hell, motorcycles have bands now. They don't have chains. They're not chain-driven. So now it's much more complex. And I think that the fire service is slowly evolving to that level, right? And a lot of it's going to be technology driven. And I'm not saying that's good or bad or right or wrong, but it is, and we can use it, but we should never abandon being just as proficient without the technology. So those are my 3 big things.
I want to just add on to the McChrystal thing, because when he did that, he like broke the mold, right? I mean, when he had this, tremendous job to do, he had a lot of talent, and it just wasn't being worked right. It just wasn't, because it was different than traditional ways. So what he said is, I'm going to empower those leaders to make decisions on the ground and go with it. And I mean, if you, for the viewers, if you get a chance, there's a ton of McChrystal on YouTube. He talks exactly about what Bobby is saying, where he used to have a briefing, and he used to have like everybody, I mean, everybody from the Pentagon to the Southern Command to the guys in the sand, all on the same page, all working together. But again, it was,
but they were all empowered to move independently too.
Right.
In other words, if you were a second lieutenant out there, with your troops, or you were a young ensign even, you could call the ball, and he was good with that.
Right.
As long as you communicated it, as long as you assessed it, to the best of your ability, as long as you shared enough information or took enough information. Talib describes it as having skin in the game. You know what I mean? In other words, it's easy for the guy out in the car, to call say, well, I think you ought to do this. It's a whole other thing if you're the guy or the gal advancing the hand line. You know what I mean? Because the person on the hand line has skin in the game. Things go horribly wrong, it's your butt. For the person in the car, it's paperwork. So
there's an awful lot to be said for the early Bernascini, Bobby Halton incident command. I think all the ingredients were there. I mean, it allows you to expand. It allows you to do the unified command. Sometimes we do change just for the sake of change. And
Pete, thank you for the defense, Pete. Seriously.
Yeah, we saw that with good old Lloyd Wayman. We burned his books and we called him a heretic, and And, 50 years later, we're digging them up, and if you find his books, they're worth a lot of money now. And NIST and UL have proven that a lot of his theories were correct. And
Well, Pete, when we came on, and we both came on around the same time, the rookie always got what job? Door control. You held the door closed, and then our bunker gear got so much better, we didn't do that anymore. But back then it was you had a door control assignment. That was a routine assignment. So, and I'm not saying throw out everything from Fire Ground Command. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that pieces of it need to evolve, right? We need to challenge some of those constructs so that if you're afraid to change, that's a problem, right? So, and a lot of folks are. And just because Alan's name on it doesn't mean it's the Bible. Alan will be the first one to tell you, hey, make it better, make it better. And you are right. It's, for Lloyd Layman's stuff, if you can compartmentalize a fire and just like an attic fire and just get enough mist in there, do a piercing nozzle, good for you. It beats the heck out of tearing a hole in the roof and try to chase it around with lines. So but we tend to look for that silver bullet, right? No one's ever right and no one's ever completely wrong. You know what I mean? It's a fascinating thing. And I love when you get some knucklehead, usually a politician, who says something stupid like, well, the science is settled. Well, then obviously you don't know the definition of the word science, you moron, because the definition of the word science means continually questioning, the assumptions. So science can never be settled. There's two things that can never be settled: an argument with your wife and science. Just kidding. I love the wife joke. I'm old enough to make wife jokes. Isn't that great? Young guys can't make wife jokes. I've been married for
one of the interesting
years.
things is that Pete probably has a couple books signed by Lloyd Layman in his library there.
I've got Lloyd's books.
Well, no, listen, everything that goes around comes around, and I think all we need to do is just be open to look at. There is no absolute 100%. This is how it works.
Okay, so I'll pull in. I forgot your daughter's name. I apologize, John.
Jamie.
Jamie, you're probably the only one here who could answer this question because it's a fashion sense question.
Okay, I'll try.
Clearly, I'm looking at these four knuckleheads and they can't answer it. But right now, are men's ties wide or are they thin?
Feel like they're getting thinner.
Getting thinner. But they were thin before they got wide, right?
Yes.
Yeah, my old man told me 65 years ago, never throw out your skinny ties. Ties can do two things: wide, thin, wide, thin. That's it. And it's just
used to call them dorks back then.
Almost the same with everything in life, right? You know what I mean? It really is. So, this is the greatest profession in the world because, there's so many other places in the world where we can have these conversations, right? We can challenge our sacred cows. We can look at things, and it's not right or wrong or good or bad. It doesn't make you a good person or a bad person. Unlike the modern day construct, the one thing I love about the fire service is we haven't politicized it yet. They've politicized policing, they've politicized everything else in life except firefighting, thank God. We're currently apolitical, and that's why we're still allowed to have these conversations like this. Once the postmodernists get a hold of us, we're screwed. But fortunately, we deal with concrete, objective reality, and that's hard to screw with. You know what I mean? The world just is what it is, and you have to deal with it, and that's what firefighting fundamentally is about. So I really think that the three big ones are going to be how we deal with basically gas emergencies, because I see the proliferation of gas in my mind in the next 20 years to be really, really huge. I think that the electric vehicles will go only so far, and then people will be looking at compressed natural gas and as a fuel alternative to liquefied gas, right? Because it's a much easier conveyance, and I just see it moving that way. At least and I'm a car guy, so that's kind of my feeling. And it was there for a while. I remember Boone Pickens was really pushing it for a while, and then it kind of got displaced. But there's always those early adopters who are out there, right? And it's fascinating. History will look, I think, well on him for that. I think he was way ahead of his time on those predictions, and then it got pushed back. I don't think you're gonna. I don't think the electric car is a secondary. It's a secondary use of power. So the power, as you guys know, has already gone through processing, and then it's been reprocessed and then reprocessed. It's like refried beans. You know, and that all diminishes the potency of that energy. And then if you go and store it into a battery for more subsequent use, that's even a further dilution of it. So it's interesting in terms of
Well,
the math, right?
the other thing, Bobby, my understanding is it doesn't go away. I mean, once you use, particularly the lithium, once you use it all up, now you have this hunk of metal that you can't just put in the dump. The other thing that's interesting, did you see that 35, was it Texas, 35,000 gallons they put on that car? They
One
actually
Tesla,
called up-
one Tesla.
yeah, they called up Tesla and said, "What are we going to do?" And they I don't know what the answer was. I
More
don't know if
water.
you know, just
More
35,000
water.
gallons of water. Think about that. That was in the parking lot. You know,
The young lady who just took over the Tesla fire, emergency services outreach program contacted me, and I said, I'd love to have you come out and let's burn a couple of Teslas together. And she said, we're working on that.
yeah, bring the crash rig for the Purple K. I don't know. Just
And that's so, but that's another piece of the whole power issue, right? If we're going to have these high voltage cars with these high voltage charging stations starting to come into residential homes, that's a big hazard, right? And stopping that power flow is going to be a big day. And when I came on, we used to pull the meters, and enough firefighters got shocked and hurt and killed and burnt that we stopped doing that. So if you're going to have an energized structure, a garage fire now, that could have an energy source, which could be powered by solar shingles or whatever. And now you have these Tesla roofs. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but Tesla makes a solar panel configuration that just looks like a normal roof. And the panels are hidden kind of inside the shingle. So you can't even tell there's panels on that roof. So you could have a completely energized home the de-energizing is going to be a big day, right? And then if you start getting storage units, in other words, batteries, lithium batteries inside, it'd be like having an ESS area within the home. And now we have, high-rise buildings that have ESS floors where you have battery storage across the 10th, 8th, 15th floor, and we really haven't seen, how that's going to play out in terms of structural firefighting.
if you haven't had to deal with a fire in a telephone transfer station, right, where they have the generator, and then they have the whole underneath the whole floor are batteries, because they don't want that to go down. It's very, very difficult to isolate those, particularly in a good day with no gear on and no smoke in the atmosphere.
And we had our conversation earlier about fires, and if you look at one of the most devastating fires in the history of the FDNY was the 1973 AT&T fire.
Right.
And almost to the man, and they were all men at that fire, they've all developed some of the most horrific cancers you can imagine.
That's absolutely correct. Ma Bell was a disaster.
Yeah.
And then they couldn't, if I remember, they couldn't clean that bill. I think they spent gazillion dollars trying to clean that building up.
Well, my good friend Danny Noonan, who's been speaking out about that, and it was at that fire, he's got 8 or 9 different cancers now, and he's fighting for his life right now in a hospital, and he's been battling cancer since the 80s, and along with almost every other firefighter that fought that fire, and we didn't know, right? God bless Dr. Wallace, Dr. Deborah Wallace, who wrote In the Mouth of the Dragon, Why Today's Fires Are More Dangerous, Fighting Fire in the Age of Plastics. She wrote it in 1990. She did a great job of reviewing that fire. She also did the Ramada Inn fire. She did the Yonker Brothers Furniture fire. She really looked at the toxicity and heat release rates and what all that means to us as firefighters. And she wrote that in 1990. And so even though it's 30 years later for her book, 40 some odd years later for Danny's fire, we're still at the beginning of the beginning. In other words, our modern day construct of time is, well, that's so 90s. Seriously, I think today looks more like the 1700s then everybody said, oh, today's like 1930. No, it's more like the 1700s. Take a hard look at the 1700s. We look a lot more like the 1700s than we do like the 1930s right now in terms of historical, analogies and comparables. And I think it was, I don't know who said it. It was either Disraeli, anyway, who said that history may not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. You know what I mean? And so you can look at the ebb and flow of history and mankind, and for the fire service and humanity in general, we're kind of in the 1700s, right? The internet is kind of like, the printing press and the getting the word out. Everybody can be a rock star today. Everybody's a pundit. Anybody who's got a camera and a screen can go, be whatever they want to be. And so they are. And there's an upside and a downside to that. And the fire service is going to have to deal with that too. How do you filter out the gibberish from the actual decent conversation? How do you, and I'm not saying we should start qualifying people, because I think all voices should be heard, but it's going to be interesting, right? It's going to be very interesting.
Only Bobby Halton can bring Benjamin Disraeli into this conversation.
It's Halton. Hey, listen, so I do want to do a shameless, because we're talking about getting the word out. We were actually you were doing I think you may have been talking at the instructors, where you talked about, when you did your first push or your FDIC's first presentation on flow path, you booked the big room and you had what, 14 people in the audience?
11.
How many years ago was that?
15.
So 15 years ago, and that's where I want to go. So 15 years ago, 11 people came into that room. Several years ago, I was down the fire academy and I went to the free publications room because I like that place. And I got the DVD on all the stuff that they did in New York and Chicago. And I took a look at that, and it was 10, 11 years old. And it was the hot subject a few years ago. So then I went back through the essentials, and I started seeing that the whole concept of flow path was in the essentials for 2 or 3 editions. But
well, it's funny you should bring that up, because recently so I'm reading, and people are always going to steal your stuff, right? So there's this British guy writing, and of course he's a British guy. So the guy's writing, on the event of a fire, it's often been noticed that a fire can sometimes articulate and move in interesting directions. In other words, a door or window having been left open will allow the fire to articulate from the first floor to the 3rd floor. And this is definitely because of what he called to be, I think he called them, not flow paths, but air currents or whatever. And these are, so basically just ripping off, and then the guy's name was Braidwood, and he wrote it in 1883. So Ifsta might have gotten it in the 60s, but there was a cat sitting in England. He was the commissioner of the London Fire Brigade, who wrote about air currents. And so in physics, we came up with the term flow path. It would be nice if we just used the term. So you have cool air gravity currents and warm air gravity currents, right? And they're always going to be passing. It's how you look at weather, right? You have the cool air and the warm air. So the warm air is always rising and it's moving high, and the cool air is always coming in because the energy from the fires is pulling it, right? So, the Ben Franklin, when he built the Franklin freaking stove, had that in the diagram that he sold with the Franklin freaking stove. And although he was the father of the American fire service, people might want to remember that he built the Franklin freaking stove in about 1720. Maybe
right.
17.
Speaking about flow path, Chief, I don't know if you already, I think Jeff Morset is aboard here, that PJ Norwood just got appointed as the Connecticut.
Yeah, we talked about it.
So
Well, it's obviously every organization makes mistakes from time to time. This will probably go down as one of Connecticut's. I'm just kidding. We talked about it earlier. He's such a wonderful guy and a great leader and a wonderful person. He's what I like about PJ is he's passionate, but he's not an ideologue. In other words, he'll grab onto an idea, like a like a bulldog on a bone, but he's also open to query, and he's open to okay, I believe this, but I could be wrong. You know what I mean? He's got just the right amount of humility to be a good boss, the right amount of conviction and the right amount of humility.
I can't remember the abbreviation of the Facebook on the YouTube deal or Facebook deal that they do. But again, it's like, I'm going to show you some stuff on a video. This is what I think. If you think something else, like I said, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Doesn't have to be. We get into these fights. This is the thing, Bobby, that upsets me. We get into these fights that you always have to do it this way. You always have to do it this way. Listen, we're in and P grew up in the same world, kind of, is we're in the transitional world. We've been using transitional attack before it was called transitional attack.
Everybody was.
Right? Go put the fire. Let's figure this out.
Give it a dash, darken it down. I mean, there were a million different terms for it, right?
I can't tell you how many times I stood in the street in New York at a brownstone, and the basement or the ground floor is going. The first thing the officer did is he broke the glass and he shot water in there.
What's the opening scene in Backdraft?
Yeah.
And they filmed that fire documentary in the 70s, for God's sakes.
We have a lot of people with the open chest, but that's another story. That's another.
Hey, I'll tell you what, that movie did a lot of good for fire service. It really did, and it continues to. And my hat's off to those folks who did that. They did a wonderful job. I got a chance to meet that actor fellow who was the star of that thing one time at a grocery store of all places in New Mexico. He had just gotten done filming another movie, and I can't think of his name now.
Russ?
Yeah, so I'm there with my kids, and we're buying some groceries. Was it what? What's his name?
Kurt Russell?
Yeah, that's the guy. So we're buying groceries. We're camping down there. We had a little condo down there, and we're at this time I think we're still camping. Anyway, I had my two little boys and a shopping cart full of marshmallows and crap, and a guy's behind me with just 2 bottles of tequila. And so I said, "Well, pal, go ahead." And I look at the guy and I look at him like, "Is he on the job?" You know what I mean? Because you look familiar. And I said, "I know you." And he goes, I've done some acting." And it's real quiet like that. And I kind of look at him and say, oh yeah. I said, "You're the guy. You're the movie guy." And he goes, "Yeah. I'm Kurt Russell." "Oh, Backdraft. I love that movie." And so he's talking to him, and I said, I'm a real fireman. I'm a real fire guy." And so he was laughing, and we had a nice conversation. He just got done filming the Western movie, Tombstone.
Okay.
And he was down there with friends, and he knew there are a lot of rich people down there. So he was down there with rich people. And that was my brush with greatness. I got grocery line with and that's back before you had cameras. I mean, we didn't have cell phones. I don't think cell phones were even invented back then. It was a long time ago.
Closest I ever came.
My boys are in their 40s. We're little guys.
me and John were up at the New York show, and I keep walking by this guy who's hawking safety equipment for fire police, and I can't figure out what it was. And finally, I said, "Dude, I know you from somewhere." He goes, "Yeah, I was the guy they interviewed in the Detroit series on YouTube." So remember the Detroit Fire Department? They had those guys they interviewed the whole way through there.
You do know that YouTube's owned by the most evil corporation in the world, right?
I don't even know who owns it.
Anytime a corporation tells you that "do no harm" is their motto, they're bad people. Yeah. Mao Zedong used the same motto. Yeah. Doesn't end well. They're bad people. Just saying.
Just saying.
I don't do Google. I don't do YouTube. Don't do Facebook. I stay away from bad people.
Well, staying away from Facebook is probably a good thing for.
Yeah. Washington said, "Associate with persons of good character. It's better to be alone than to be in bad company."
There you go.
So I'm with Washington. I got him over here. I've got other presidents on this wall, Peter. I've got Lincoln and Ronald Reagan.
I would expect Ronald Reagan to be on your wall, my friend.
I've got 3 Republicans, and I've got Washington up on that wall. Washington was my favorite president, and he hated political parties. If you read, he did two of his most important writings. If you want to read some good Washington, is his farewell address, which most people have read, where he admonishes people he hated political parties. He said there will be the undoing of the Union, and I believe he was right. And he also, he wrote the circular letter, which a lot of people haven't read. And the circular letter, what made it so famous was he outlined how our government should look. And so they used that when they wrote the Constitution. Madison basically used much of that circular letter to formulate his thinking on how to put the three branches and, you know, the distribution of powers and checks and balances. Washington wrote that. I mean, Washington was a much deeper thinker than people gave him credit for. And
just remember, Chief, that Ron Reagan started out as a Union president.
he was a bedwetting liberal, for goodness sakes. Just kidding.
So
Just
listen,
kidding.
one of the reasons I wanted
No
to have,
disrespect to my other bedwetting liberal friends.
listen, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on this month was you've got
As
this,
you may have guessed, Peter and I have really opposing political views,
well,
and
what
we
is-
absolutely love one another.
and you're very comfortable. with it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
No, we unconditionally love one another.
And we have to go to the coffee trade again, and our Marine friend.
Jefferson once said that a man's politics, ideology, or religion is no reason for me not to be his friend.
There you go.
And I would add their
We're not gonna
blatant
go down
stupidity. I'm just kidding.
I don't want to go down the whole road of the friendships that are broken up over the last few years. But anyway, what I do want to do, one of the
Those
reasons,
weren't a smart people or real friendships.
there you go.
If you're gonna not be someone's friend because of who they support politically, you're a moron.
Right, friends are friends.
You're an absolute moron.
But what I would like to
Alan
do,
Bernstein and I, you're a political clone of Bruno. Another shallow thinker. Just kidding.
well, listen, hey, you're taking away my story here. So, but what I would like to do, you got this little event coming up in a few weeks. You got 35,000 people coming for lunch. We did want to have you come in June to still give you another opportunity for a shameless plug for the largest training event in the United States. So why don't you take a few minutes to do that? Because it is still time. You can still register.
Yeah, if you want to do hot training, those classes are starting to sell out. We have a couple that I think sold out today. So if you do want to do the hands-on, that always sells out fast. Everything else is kind of open seating. So the conference side, don't worry about that. But there's still hotel rooms. Remember, it's summer school, so it's what the reason we moved it to these dates is because nothing else is going on, and so we've got a lot more hotel rooms available. So you know the troops can get downtown. There's no there's no COVID restrictions. They ended all that stuff yesterday. So you know you don't have to worry about social distancing or wearing face diapers or any of that stuff. You can hug people and all that good stuff again. So that's nice. We've got 200 classrooms planned. We've got 70 or 80 workshops. We've got 21 hands-on training classes. Fool's Bash is still on. The Union Party is on. The Fun Run is on. The Stair Climb is on. The what am I missing? Comedy Night for the Cancer Support Network is on. Travis Howes is going to be speaking. Talking about backdrafts, Steve Chikarotis, who was the subject matter expert, he was lieutenant at the time in the Chicago Fire Department for backdraft. He is going to be keynoting. He's also the subject matter expert and the actor who plays Chief Walker on Chicago Fire. He's a producer of Chicago Fire. He's going to be our keynoter. And then that's day one. On day two, Connecticut's own John Austin.
You're saying John's going, right?
He's going to be our featured speaker, followed by the Conley brothers. If you don't know the Conley brothers, one of them's a firefighter. Larry's a firefighter. He's a captain in the city of St. Louis. And his brother David is a nationally acclaimed actor, playwright, and a producer. And the two of them have a program called GLUE, Growing Leaders Through Empowerment. And they also do tremendous leadership stuff. And what David brings to it is an ability to, as an actor, as an incredible actor, he can do these role plays where, you know, you forget that you're role playing. I mean, he draws you in, right? To where, you know, you got to tell guys not to smack them in the puss. No, we're pretending here. You know, no fisticuffs. So they're going to do an incredibly powerful lecture that about interpersonal dynamics and leadership. So as a keynote, and it's going to be phenomenal. It's our first team keynote ever at FDIC. Next year, we're going to have from Traditions Training, Doug Mitchell, FDNY, and Dan Shaw. They're going to do another team keynote, and Frank Viscuso for 2022.
Nice.
So I'm always planning. So right now I'm thinking about who it's going to be for 2023. So the folks we're going to do in 2023. I don't know what we're going to do there yet. I haven't completely unwrapped it in my head, but that's where we're at. So if you want to catch summer school, the 2021 summer school edition of FDIC, and remember I attended a lot of summer school. I'm not going to say all the reasons why, but I attended a lot of summer school, and it was always a great experience. It was always awesome because you met cats that you never met before. You know what I mean? And it was generally, I don't know how to put it, but it was generally a looser crowd. You know what I mean? It was generally a looser crowd, and the instructors were somewhat more effective, because if you were in summer school, it was usually a reason. It was a corrective activity. So we're approaching it with the same attitude. And if you're worried about safety, we've tripled our safety measures. We've got some of the most elegant safety people. We're doing multiple sessions on rehabdo and heat stress. We've got multiple physicians who will be on duty with us every day. We've doubled our ambulances. We've doubled our, we've got cooling tubs at every site. We've got tents. So we've left no stone left unturned in terms of safety. But the important thing to take away from that is right now up there in Connecticut, it's like 95 degrees, right?
Right.
And you're still fighting fire. So if we don't train under those conditions, how can we be expected to perform under those conditions? And so, we're gonna do that, and I get it. I would rather it was 65 degrees and, and all that, but it's not. It's going to be hot and it's going to be muggy.
Chief, you do everything in first class, and I'm sure this show's going to outdo every other show. And you're fantastic at what you do. And thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Pete. It's been, as they say, it's been a good run.
Well, we wanted to thank you so much for coming on. I know you're a busy guy, and we really do appreciate you giving us this time. So at this point, are you up for a question or two?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Anybody from the audience, if you have a question for the chief, just if you look on your screen, there's a little microphone with a line through it. If you click on that, you'll be open and you can talk. We'll give you a couple seconds here to do that, and if not, we're gonna let the chief head back to his cell phone. Get back to work.
Actually, this is my workout. Next 30 minutes is my workout hours. I'll go do my run, do my total gym, and
then you'll be all set.
Back on the elliptical, right, Chief?
Yeah, today's just it's a 10-mile day. So.
Oh, okay. How's the wheels? How's your car?
The car's a good. Grace won gold at the Mustang Club of America show in Eureka Springs. She's now going to be in the Kansas City show, which is a really, really big show. So she's going to be in that just the weekend before FDIC. So I'll be taking Grace up there.
It's the Mustang, right?
She's a 1965 A code, and then I'm doing a new wiring harness in Rolling Thunder, and I'm upgrading the cooling fan in that to a 5.0 cooling fan. So Rolling Thunder's a racing Mustang. She's dropped, lowered. She's an 06. She's Rolling Thunder's a very dangerous machine in my hands. If someone knew how to drive it, it's a really good car. But in my hands, it's like a guy with Parkinson's playing with nitroglycerin. At any moment, something really horrible is going to happen.
They foolishly put me in a Javelin. Like one of these machine, mechanic guys jacked up this car and asked me if I wanted to take it for a ride. I said, sure. I almost put it right in. All I did was touch the accelerator like that much. The next thing I know, my head was snapped back and I was heading towards a tree when I jumped on the brakes. That was the last time they let me drive that. I don't know why.
Well, we have tamed automobiles dramatically. And again, it's because folks want you know, everything to be so incredibly safe. And I get it. You know, you don't want lunatics, you know, drag racing down the streets, but I still enjoy a good drag race from time to time, where it's legal sometimes, and or the person has a Chevy, then it's not.
That's the tripwire right there. That's
Right.
all that matters.
But especially if the clown's in a vet. Give me a break. Just kidding. My dream car, if I ever get a chance, I would love to get my hands on a 53 vet.
Really?
Yeah.
I
So
thought you were a Ford guy.
I am a Ford guy, but the 53 vet is iconic. It's a true roadster, and I love roadsters. I'm a sucker for a good roadster. So if I can get my hands on a 53 vet, I'd buy in a minute. That and an F100. If I could get my hands on an F100, anytime from probably 51 through say 60, I'd love to get my hands on an F100 pickup.
Yeah, I love those too.
So that's my retirement plan, John. Other people want to go to the villages. Not me, buddy.
You want to go racing?
Yeah, well, I put a mechanics pit in my garage, and I'm having a hoist put in so I can lift engines. And
so, just for full disclosure, that's the pit at the house.
Yeah, my house. I have an actual pit that I can work on.
But down the street, how far away is the big barn?
The big one's about a mile and a half. That's
a mile and a half down is a Butler building, right?
Yeah, it's a Butler building with 8 lifts.
That's where the rest of the stock is.
Well, we like to call them dreams in progress.
Well, I tell you what, I've seen that red Mustang, and it's a sweet ride.
Thanks.
That is a sweet ride.
She's my crown jewel. It's an amazing car. So.
Well, listen, so having heard nothing from the floor, Bobby, I'm going to say thank you so much.
Oh, God bless. Thank you for having me. John, you didn't say much, but.
Well, I wanted you to know that I really appreciated you going through my history. You talked about nuclear power, you talked about gas plants, you talked about power going into the battery storage facilities. You know, you just made me feel at home.
You know, I think that firefighters who don't study power are making an incredible mistake. It's an incredible mistake. I think that your knowledge in industry is so critical to what we do that trivializing the importance of it is fraught with great moral hazard, because energy is everything, right? Right now, there's nothing more important than energy. And you know, people talk about water, people talk about all of that, but it's all about energy. And as we move forward as a society, how we manage that and how we respond to it is going to be critical. And
absolutely. You know, you look at where we were in, let's just go back to the 80s, not to date myself, but where we were in the 80s, and we have a hurricane come through and people lose power, and the patience they had to lose power for 4, 5, 6 days, and they just dealt with it. And now we have that same event, you know, 35, 40 years later, and we're a day into the event and people are screaming they don't have their power back. It's because they've become so accustomed to having that energy to power their cell phone and the computer. And if they don't have it, it really throws people for a loop. And, you know, when we're looking at the life expectancy of the 1970 nuclear plants coming to an end, you know, their life expectancy is, you know, we see them closing all over New England. So we've seen the rise in the gas powered plants. We've seen the gas turbines, and we've seen them go from, you know, smaller units. Now we see some bigger ones. But you're going to see, I think, with energy in the near future, you're going to start seeing in the Northeast anyway, you're going to start seeing these energy storage facilities that they already have out in the Southwest, where they can take some of the renewable, the wind energy and the solar, and store it so that they can then leak it back into the grid to maintain, you know, grid stability. So I do think that, and as you touched on that, and even in a better sense, you talked about how it was going to be in residential, where you could come across that with the recharging of cars and the batteries in the residential area. That's all pretty important stuff, and I think it's coming faster than a lot of us, realize.
I
And
agree. And I think that it's paramount that we're ahead of it, not chasing it.
Yeah.
I don't want some horrible catastrophe to make it come to our attention. I want to pay attention to it before a horrible catastrophe in hopes that we don't have a horrible catastrophe. And, the other side of your business, the hygiene side of it, the fire service has been woefully negligent in industrial hygiene practices. We're just starting industrial hygiene. If you can imagine that, could you imagine if a customer of yours, a major power producer or a pipeline, imagine if they were just starting to understand industrial hygiene. Yeah, they'd be like just out of business. And we're just starting to understand the implications of industrial hygiene. Matter of fact, I don't think there's a degree in fire service industrial hygiene yet.
No, you have to take a left. You can get right. You go to the left to get your industrial hygienist because there's no fire based.
Which is fascinating, right? It's fascinating. It's beyond the pale, and but anyway.
One thing I'll give before I arrived here, one thing that John always did that I thought was when I heard about it. So we do these big power plant. So they're going to take the whole turbine out. They're going to replace the turbine, right? So this is a major evolution. One of the things that John always did is he'd reach out, because a lot of these are in larger communities. He'd reach out to the fire department, he would actually host the whole assignment up to the power plant, and then we would do a high angle response from 150 feet up in the air through down to Stokes to then do all the rope work and get everybody so everybody knew each other. And that kind of investment, when if something did happen later on, everybody knew each other. You know what I mean? It's like anything else. They recognize the face. They may not know your name, but they know who you were from. So again, it just made, if there was a real incident, it made things a lot easier. And I think that
I love it.
that's you got to do that. You can't have the walls up.
No.
Because when
and Zoom just doesn't cut it. I mean, no disrespect, it's a great platform, but I'm not a big fan of online education. I'm just not. I mean, I think it's a useful tool for flipping the classroom, right? Preloading some cognitive stuff. But there's some really interesting studies that if you read a book on like your e-reader, and I've got one of those things, mine's an Oasis, that your comprehension is about a third compared to if you just bought the book. And this isn't a great example. This is more like just a pleasure reading. But say you're reading a technical book. I just read Doom by Niall Ferguson, and I couldn't imagine not reading it in my hands because it was that deep a book, right? So, and I have many friends who say, "Well, I listen to the audibles." Okay. Yeah.
Audibles are good when you're driving.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Then buy the book so you'll know what was in it.
You have a friend.
Yeah. Then buy the book. If it's a book that should be read, right? There are books we read for pleasure. I've got hundreds of them. But a book that you're reading because the subject matter is consequential, read it. So
I want to put you actually on the spot because you do a tremendous amount of reading. How many books are you reading a week or a month?
I don't know, 8 or 10 a month. Last month I read Taboo, Doom, Two Truths About America, Seven Men, Race of Aces, and then a couple of, just for pleasure books. Things Worth Dying For by Chapeau. I try to read things as they come out.
You're also big into old, as you mentioned before, you like pulling stuff out of back here.
Yeah, I like all the classics, and I like
He sure does. He remembers some of those people because he probably knows them personally.
Yeah.
But I'm one of the people that actually reads the chief's editorials, and
You're the person.
his last one was right on about reading. And, I got my dog here, and it's lightning and thundering.
I think that's why Izzy came in. Yeah, must be lightning and thunder. So she's a 9-year-old golden. But things like if people would read like the brothers Kosmonov, or if people would read Romanov rather, if people would read The Bureaucrat or Crime and Punishment or Gulag Archipelago or any of the great Russian literature, and then look at what's happening in our country today with this slow rise of tyranny. It's terrifying. All of this has happened before, and it's happening now, and folks need to become aware of it. It's terrifying, and when you read those people, be careful about give up no freedom ever, least of all freedom of your mind, and never allow anyone to have you say something you know not to be true. Never, because the minute you do that, you'll start to despise yourself just a little more with every passing day. And that's the whole message of Crime and Punishment. He got away with murder. No, he didn't. And so it's a fascinating study in human nature. So dust off your old Russian classics.
All those books from high school. Man,
Yeah.
you're gonna make me dig them all out.
Yeah, well, think about it. The kids aren't even reading them today. It was a master's class for the people from Drexel University, fourth year students graduating in can't remember what the discipline was. They'd never read one piece of Russian literature, not a single one of them.
Really?
How did you get through school without, they didn't even know who the postmodernists were. They couldn't tell you who Derrida or Foucault was if you put them in a lineup. So it was pretty amazing.
It's important to keep history in perspective, and from the times that things actually happened and the culture that existed, and I think we're forgetting that.
Right. If you don't know who Locke and Bacon and were, then how do you dare criticize Western culture? I mean, how do you dare criticize anything? I mean, if you're walking around with a copy of Ibram Kendi in your hip pocket, you're a moron, in my opinion. The guy's real name is Henry Rogers, by the way, just so you know. But
Chief, you've already embarrassed the crap out of me because I didn't know about half of those people you said. Because I'm not as avid a reader as you are, that's for sure.
Just the only book you got to worry about reading, Nick, at your age is this one.
I got you, bro.
Keep that one close, and you'll be all right.
You mean this one?
What is that?
There it is.
Oh, good.
There it is.
It was fading into you're not actually, see, Johnny's not actually in the office because when he moved around, he disappeared.
That's how come
He's scamming you, John.
That's how come me and
That
Jimmy
was a secret,
exact
too.
same spot.
You owe John an hour and a half's pay. Oh,
That's what I remember. I've got the.
Well, thank
Well,
you.
listen, thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having me. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for coming. Appreciate having you.
It was a
Right.
pleasure. It was a
So
pleasure.
let me just close out with a couple things. So again, Bobby, thank you so much for coming. For the folks that are here, if you have other folks that could not make the early time, we will be rebroadcasting this, obviously not live, at our regular time at 7 p.m. So if you want to share that information with them, let them know. Also, a couple of things. Thanks to Jamie, we've taken a lot of our recordings and we've turned them into podcasts. So if you look at hashtag critical conversations or hashtag JLN critical conversations and just type that in, that'll bring you to a page and you can look at the stuff we've done in the past. Again, this is part of a 4-part series on leadership. So let's see, July, trying to remember who I have here. So July, we have the superintendent of the National Fire Academy coming on, the brand new. Yep, Eric's is coming on. He's going to be talking about the things they had to do to survive COVID and what they've had to do to get that place reopened as much as it is in the future. Every day like everywhere else, things are being relaxed. So, and also we want to ask him about his vision for the academy. He did a tremendous job. He actually took a fire and a police academy and blended them together successfully. And obviously getting the job as the superintendent of National Fire Academy is not easy. So we're going to be talking to him. We're going to take the month of August off.
And he's also the former head of the North American Training Directors.
I did not know that. I did not know that. And he's just a riot. He's just he's a great guy. We
dear friend.
The last class I taught, one of the instructors, the exciting part was that they opened up a Dunkin' Donuts in Emmitsburg. Breaking news. And so if my partner was not up teaching, he would take an order from the class and go get Dunkin' Donuts and bring goodies back. And Eric's managed to come by every day to see what was there for goodies. He's a good guy. We are going to take August off, and then I'm really excited. Also, we have Dennis Compton, retired fire chief from Arizona. He responded to all three terrorism sites. He responded to Oklahoma City. He responded to New York, and then he was sent to the Pentagon. So it is. It's going to be the 28th, Jamie? No, it's the 8th. It's just before 9/11. So we're going to do a little memorial. 20 years this year for 9/11. So we're going to do we're not going to forget type of thing. And he's going to talk about Oklahoma, FDN down to New York, and then the Pentagon. And then we're going to end it up the week before the National Fallen Firefighters Memorial. A friend of ours, Chief Ron Kanderman, is the IC. 2 years ago, the chief that was the incident commander stepped down, and Ron took that over. So we'll have him. We're going to have one of our own, Tony Ruggiero from UConn, talking about the Honor Guard. We're going to have, I have to get a return call to Matt Tobia, who's in charge of the escorts. And then we're going to have Timmy Jeffries. And for the people in the state, know that his dad, Kenny Jeffries, died in the line of duty at the submarine base fire department. And Timmy's coming on to talk as a survivor. So that's going to bring us through October. So yeah, right, because it's the 2 in September, and I got to come up with somebody else for October. Am I missing somebody? I think that's it, right? 2 in August, none in August, 2 in September. Right, because the first weekend, the memorial is the first weekend in October. So we'll have the fallen firefighters on the last week of September. There we go. That's what happens when I go that far out. So thank you, folks. As always, we appreciate. Bobby, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, for the invitation. And hey, Chief Halton, our Camaro buddy, Reggie Freeman, now is out in Oakland, California.
Went to Oakland.
Oh,
Yeah, he's doing,
what a joke.
Yeah, he's doing well.
Yeah, Reggie's a good guy. He's a good guy.
He's a Camaro guy, right?
Huh?
Isn't he a Camaro guy?
Yeah, he sure is.
Guy. Yeah, he's a big Camaro guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he sure
One of
is.
the guys who used to work for me was a buddy of his from the club up in Hartford.
We can
Yeah, he had to send the baby out there. I don't know. That's a whole nother. I'm excited he's out there. I think he's going to do great, as he always does. He's got a lot to work with and a lot of challenges. They have 57 different, we had a kid from Oakland in a class, 57 different branded significant gangs, not like wannabe gangs, significant gangs, a huge, they have a huge tent population. If there's a piece of grass, it's got a tent on it. Every ramp, there's huge, there's a technical term, there's a modern term they've come up with, but they have a huge
urban outdoorsman.
Yeah, but there's something, there's a politically correct, but now, so every day he posts the runs for Oakland on Facebook, and now under the fire runs, he says whether or not a homeless camp was involved. That's how many homeless campfires he has a day. It's a good day out there when they don't have one. And those camps are like the LA ones where it's a full assignment because it's a whole block long, 20 feet deep, 1 story most of the time high. You know what I mean? All the way out there.
That used to be a third world problem.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
And listen to the Oakland folks. It wasn't a great, it's a high demand, well, a lot of challenges, just everything from language to education to fear to mental health to everything. It's just, and that's what's going on across that whole area. So maybe we'll get him on.
Thank you, folks. Thanks, Chief.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Good night. Pleasure meeting you.
Thanks, Bobby.
Good
Likewise.
seeing you guys.
Thank you.